Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to day 10 of the Trump administration. I think President Trump won this election because he was going to bring down grocery prices and he was going to try to lower costs. Instead, he has introduced chaos at a level that even makes the first term look organized. Since Monday, when he, late at night with no warning, put in effect a freeze on all federal spending everywhere across Virginia. There have been concerns. We've heard from local governments. We've heard from the folks who work on roads and bridges in terms of contractors. We've heard from the Domestic Abuse Center in a series of towns in the Shenandoah Valley. We've heard from Head Start organizations all across the state. Meals on Wheels. The idea that you're going to freeze funding for 90 days means a lot of these operations are going to have to fire a lot of folks. They don't have the ability to fund themselves. Today we had Robert Kennedy in before the Finance Committee. And he kept saying, don't worry, it's not going to touch individuals. He didn't understand that community health centers, where a lot of folks get their health care, the most vulnerable, that funding supposedly is frozen. And it's remarkable to me that we don't hear more from, we've heard from a lot of the Democrats in state government, I would hope we'd hear from everybody else, that all of the federal funds that pass through the state government into local programs, those appear to be frozen as well. But then we had, an hour ago, we got this tweet saying, hey, we screwed up. We got to rescind. We're going to think about it some more. Then 30 minutes later, we got this tweet from the White House press secretary. I don't have the foggiest idea, since this one says, no, the freeze is still in place. This is chaos on steroids. And what do you do if you're that Head Start program that has to figure out whether it can still pay people or going to continue to get operating funds? What do you do with the Meals on Wheels program? We've already talked about community health centers. I can tell you, somebody who ran a business, this is not a way to run the most important enterprise in the world, the American government. Then on top of that, if that wasn't enough fodder for day 8, and I guess day 9 yesterday, late in the afternoon, administration puts out this supposed offer to have everybody who wants to quit and get paid till September 30th. One, we don't know if that's legal. 2, there's no money for that in the budget. 3, what would we do if at air traffic controllers, where we're already 2,000 folks short, if another couple thousand air traffic controllers, I'll say, fine, I'm going to take the money and not work for the next 6 months. We'd have an air traffic emergency. One of the things is hit a lot of Virginians and a lot of Americans, price of eggs keeps going up. Well, I can tell you, if everybody who works on trying to contain the bird flu, who are federal health inspectors in terms of animal safety, if they all quit, you think egg prices are high now? See what egg prices would be in 2 weeks. Or do we really think it's good if all the federal employees end up, who are doing salmonella inspection, all quit at the same time? And I guess we shouldn't be surprised. President Trump's a pick for the OMB that's supposed to control all this or run this process. He was the author of Project 2025 that Trump said repeatedly, oh, don't believe any of that, not interested in that. Well, Russell Vought, who I questioned in committee about a week ago, said, and I quote, He wants to traumatize the federal workforce. He wants to make them wake up every day thinking they're villains. Well, I can't think of anything more traumatic than what our federal workforce has been going through. And again, it's not some faceless bureaucrat. This is the person that keeps you safe in the air traffic controller who inspects your milk and your eggs and your making sure we don't have salmonella in terms of our meat. It's a person that provides health care for somebody at a community health center. This is remarkable. So you've got this offer that you don't know will be honored. You have the potential of a whole lot of folks quitting. And I would say to my federal workforce, if there's ways to make it more efficient, count me in. Wholesale, bad management practices, offering people a buyout that we don't know if it's legal, if there's any money. And what you talk about I'm afraid of is anybody that says, well, I'm going to take the offer. And then you end up the offer not being honored. You got a big target on your back in terms of for future risks. Let's face it. This guy is trying to stiff the federal employees, just as he stiffed all of the private contractors who he never paid in his private business. This is not what America voted for. It's not what we need to do if we're going to maintain a more efficient government that provides services that are essential. And I just wish some of my Republican friends at the state level, the federal level, everywhere, would step up and say, this doesn't affect just red states or blue states. It affects the whole United States. And this will have draconian effects on people's lives. Efficiency, count me in. A thorough review of programs, count me in. Finding savings, count me in. Non-thought through freezes on federal dollars going out. You've got the White House not even on the same page, leaving me as a senator is fairly informed on this stuff, scratching my head. If you're running the domestic shelter in Harrisonburg where you get some federal funds to stay alive and stay open, what do you think at this point? And obviously, the effect this will have on federal workers. If you want to traumatize workforce, they're playing that. They're playing out the 2025 handbook. You want to make sure when you climb on an airplane it's safe, or when you eat a piece of meat that it's safe, or when you make sure that our egg prices aren't going to go up more dramatically because we got more and more bird flu across America, then you ought to make sure you call your elected officials, particularly those Republican elected officials who so far have not taken much of a position. With that, Laura, why don't I turn it over to you and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Mitchell Miller with WTOP. Mitchell? Okay, we're going to move on to Karina Garcia with Wavy News.
Hi, Senator. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. So what is your stance on the Trump administration's decision to revoke protections for sensitive locations like schools and churches from immigration enforcement? And are there any plans by Congress to establish clearer legal protections for these spaces?
Listen, I don't want immigration officials going into churches and schools without any constraints. I think it's bad policy. I think it will interrupt kids' ability to learn or folks' ability to worship. Reasonable issues, I'll vote. We're making sure that people who have broken the law, there ought to be a path to deportation. Even supported that piece of legislation recently. But this kind of whole-scale effort to intimidate folks where they pray or where they learn is over the line. And I will work with our local communities. And I know I've got a meeting shortly with a number of the school boards up in Northern Virginia. This, again, is not what I think people hired Mr. Trump to do. Undocumented folks who've broken major laws, that's one category. Going into people's churches and schools, I think is beyond the line.
Senator, our next question is Kelsey Childress with WSUT.
Hi, this is actually Alexia Simmers. I'm filling in for her right now. But my question is regarding, you just recently questioned Kennedy about, his position. Wondering if you can touch on that and kind of give us a little bit of a rundown on what are your thoughts on how he answered those questions?
Well, listen, I've voted so far for 4 of President Trump's nominees. I'm trying to give everybody a free look. I believe these hearings are a job interview. I'm not going to vote to confirm Robert Kennedy because, one, he didn't have a basic understanding of even how the funds that flow into our healthcare system work. The fact is, don't worry, this freeze is only not going to affect Social Security or Medicare. Didn't understand anything about community health centers, didn't understand how many state healthcare programs will be affected by this federal dollar freeze. I think that's disqualifying. I think the fact that, he's a constant critic on Medicaid, when literally hundreds of thousands of Virginians, most vulnerable, receive Medicaid. And candidly, a lot of our seniors who are in nursing homes of middle-class parents are on Medicaid as well. You freeze that or go against Medicaid, you're going to have real problems. I feel like in Virginia, in terms of over half of Virginia abortions are performed with the abortion pill, mifepristone. The fact that he wants to go against 42 studies proving its safety and efficacy, and that he's just going to follow whatever Trump says, is disqualifying. And again, when I asked him, he had said publicly he wants to get rid of 600 people at NIH. He told me in my office, I asked him, I think it was 2,200 folks. He had no idea where he was going to cut. Is he going to cut people, the researchers at NIH, just because they work on vaccines that he doesn't like? Are they going to cut the folks who work in our community health centers, federally sponsored community health centers? Where are those folks going to turn? So I'll be voting against Mr. Kennedy. And again, I think anyone who observed that hearing, I like what Mr. Kennedy has said about trying to end chronic health. If he'd stayed in that lane, but all of these other issues around vaccines, around how we would cut back some of our researchers and how we would choose which vaccines that he would fire folks not on or not, his lack of understanding about how the federal government actually delivers health care outside of Medicare and Social Security, means that I'll be a no.
Senator, we're going to jump back to Mitchell Miller with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Sorry about that first time around. I wonder if you could talk about your concerns related to Tulsi Gabbard ahead of tomorrow's hearing and your views of her credibility, especially in light of her visit to Syria, where there have been suggestions she wasn't truthful when she made that visit with President Assad.
Listen, I've said going in to my meeting with Tulsi Gabbard, I had questions. I have questions coming out. And the amount of press reports, much of which I'm aware of, that have come out just in the last 48 hours is overwhelming. And it is remarkable that even the Wall Street Journal, who's very conservative, questioned her ability to oversee the 18 different intelligence agencies that make up our intelligence community. And remember, we have the best intelligence forces in the world, but we also are supplemented by our allies all over the world. And the notion, and I'm going to raise some of these questions tomorrow, the notion that we would put somebody in charge of those agencies that thought Edward Snowden is a hero, I'm not sure. I'm going to ask, how would our allies trust to share information with us going forward? So I've got an awful lot of questions. I've got an awful lot of concerns. There are a whole host of issues, and I think those issues will be raised fully and broadly tomorrow in the committee.
Senator, our next question is Jad Khalil with Virginia Public Media. Jad? Okay, we're going to move on to Jory Heckman with Federal News Now. Jory, jumping to you. Moving right along.
Hi, sorry about that delay.
Jory, you're up.
Yeah, I was sorry about that. Sorry for the delay here. Just as far as the offers to federal employees that you mentioned earlier, Senator, there's a lot of questions that federal employees have not had answered yet in terms of what this deal entails, what this would mean for their health care, what this would mean for whatever benefits they'd be able to take with them if they take this deal. Any clarity or any answers around that part of it?
Listen, we've not been able to get the answers as the United States Senator. Tim Kaine and I are working very closely together on this. If we can't get answers, how can that air traffic controller, how can that individual who works at Department of Education, or how can that individual who is a park ranger in the Shenandoah Valley make a decision? There's a question whether you can even legally, the president can do this across the whole workforce. It's never been done before. The question of where the money's going to come from. And, this trying to rush people, scare people, intimidate them into making a choice, said it before, I'll say it again. I think he's trying to stiff the federal workforce the same way he stiffed contractors who worked for him on all of the failed Trump properties around the country. And our federal workforce deserves better. I mean, there are laws in place in terms of and severance packages and health care benefits that have been negotiated. Is all that out the window? Is rule of law really going to be just dispensed with when it comes to our federal workforce? And as I mentioned earlier, we're 2,000 air traffic controllers short. What happened to another 5,000 air traffic controllers take this offer? Or everybody that inspects our milk or inspects our eggs for bird flu? What happens if all the, in a single national park, everybody takes the offer? Park shut down? And air traffic controllers take up to a year to train. You can't replace those folks overnight. The only thing I can think this is back to Russell Vogt, Project 2025. Let's traumatize the federal workforce. Let's villainize them. And if you want to find efficiencies, count me in. You want to declare wholesale, let's cut out people regardless of their merit. That goes against anything that Trump or even many of the folks around him who've talked a lot about meritocracy. You really want the country's best NIH researchers to take that offer? What does that do in terms of our ability to continue to innovate? Or the folks at NIST there's a lot of information about DeepSeek out there right now, the new Chinese AI tool. You want the folks who are following this to all take the offer and quit? You don't replace those individuals overnight. It's stunning, both the breadth and the audaciousness of this, particularly when there's nowhere in the budget that would even approximate where these dollars are coming. And you think the American people are going to want to pay folks to not work for the next 6 months? Maybe this works in the tech world, but it's not like the tech world, and I say this as a former technology guy, it's not like the tech world employees are the ones making sure that you climb on an airplane, it's going to be safe, or making sure the eggs you eat or the chicken you eat are going to be safe. Again, not legal, no money, and unfortunately, Mr. Trump has a record of stiffing anybody in business transaction after business transaction.
Senator, our next question is Austin Hicks with WDBJ.
Hello, Senator. How are you doing? Thank you for having me today. My question I wanted to ask was, you were mentioning earlier about how there's so much uncertainty with what's going on in the White House. Earlier today, or just a few hours ago, they rescinded that that order for federal freeze. But as you said, we're not sure what's going on. What's the plan for the future?
Which piece of paper do you want to believe, Austin? Austin, which piece of paper do you want to believe? The one that says we're rescinding it, I think, which is this one or this one, 2 or 3 lines, no guidance, or the one that says no, never mind, it's all still in purpose. This is not the way to operate the government of the United States of America. But ask your question. I'm sorry. It's just, as a business guy, this would never be the way to operate. When I was governor, Virginia was named best managed state. If I'd pulled these antics when I was governor, Virginia would be in the bottom 5.
Yes, sir. And that's kind of my question is, how do you guys continue to work with the president with such uncertainty? Like, as you said, we don't know what's going on. What is the plan going forward, at least for you and Senator Kaine as well, to help make sure that all the federal government here in Virginia, those programs like SNAP and things like that, are able to try to function in the way they can?
And great question. And we are, for 30 minutes, we felt, well, we've got a little bit of time to try to figure this out. If they rescinded the order, obviously there is the court hold, but that only goes till Monday. My fear is that Mr. Vogt, who I'm definitely going to vote against, who is the architect of most of this activity, who thinks we ought to traumatize our federal workforce, that's bad enough. But what about all the folks who rely on the services of the SNAP program or the or Head Start or Meals on Wheels? At least they're hitting everybody. They're going after kids. They're going after old folks. They're going after folks in domestic violence centers. We're going to rally, but I got to tell you, we got to have our Republican friends and colleagues step up. I know some are saying, well, we want to be quiet in terms of pushing back. I don't think this is an administration that's going to respond to quiet activity. And, and the thing about these orders are, they didn't just hit blue states. They hit all states. They didn't just pick some programs. They hit all programs. They've carved out a few, but the vast majority of government funding, if this freeze goes back into effect after the court short hold on Monday, we got cash. What are folks going to do over the weekend? I've had folks, because they weren't sure what was going to happen on the student loan, say, he said that he's going to protect student loans, but can you take your word for that? So do you go ahead and pay the tuition for this semester, or you go ahead and drop out of school? I just don't know if they understand how this affects real people's lives.
Senator, our next question is Connor Knuckles with WRIC.
Hi, Senator. So yesterday, stacks of unopened mail were found in the trash at a Richmond church. And after being highly vocal about USPS needing to address mail issues last year, what are your thoughts on the situation and seemingly ongoing issues with mail delivery?
Well, was the mail found in a church or at a post office?
It was found in the trash can of a church.
Well, let me find out. I mean, we have been, the whole delegation, bipartisan, has been on Postmaster DeJoy. It was a mistake to have Richmond be the guinea pig for this new program. I do think the Postmaster General is trying to improve service. You got a business that is, unfortunately, there's a lot less mail than there used to be as we do more stuff online. He promised us that we're going to see that improved service. We saw the numbers tick up a little bit. I have not seen this report. Let me get it first, and if you can get back to me later today or first thing tomorrow, I'll have a fuller comment. But we have a regular update from the Postal Service. I want to find out how many pieces of mail, and did it come from the post office, or let's get the information first. But anything that continues to have Richmond area be a delay is not acceptable.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator, our next question is Mike Gooding with 13 News Now. Mike? Okay, we're going to move on to our final question of Dan Aguita with Arlington Now. Senator, those are all our questions.
Well, again, folks, you like me, like people all over the country, are wondering, what's the plan? Which of these do you believe? Or what do you believe? The fact is, for a lot of folks, the one thing they didn't like about the first Trump term was chaos. It feels to me like this level of chaos at day 10 of this new administration maybe even exceeds some of the worst weeks of the first term. We're going to stay at it. And I just appeal again to Republican members across the country. Your folks are going to get hurt as well. Those folks are concerned about air traffic safety. What happens if all the air traffic controllers or group takes these buyouts that, again, may not get paid? This ought to be something that should not be partisan or regional. We ought to say, find efficiency, fine. Create chaos or traumatize the workforce. That's not a good business practice. Thanks, everybody.